I stood in the center of the glass-walled boardroom on the 53rd floor, surrounded by every executive, every department head, every person who mattered in the company I'd helped build from the ground up. The city stretched endlessly behind me through those windows, tiny cars moving like ants far below, oblivious to what was happening up here in the clouds. My hands weren't shaking. Not yet. Victor Kane sat at the head of the table like a king on his throne, his silver hair perfectly styled, his custom suit probably worth more than most people's cars. He was smiling. That smile, I'd seen it 1,000 times before, but never directed at me like this, never with this particular edge of cruelty dancing in his eyes. "Emma," he said, and his voice carried that false warmth he used when he was about to destroy someone. "I want to thank you for your 7 years of service to Kane Industries." 7 years. I felt those years like weights pressing down on my shoulders, the late nights, the missed birthdays, the relationships I'd sacrificed, the dreams I'd put on hold because I believed in this company, believed in the work we were doing. 7 years, Victor continued, leaning back in his chair with casual arrogance, is a long time to carry someone who can't keep up with the pace of innovation. The room went silent. So silent I could hear the air conditioning humming through the vents, could hear someone's chair creak as they shifted uncomfortably. "Wait," I heard myself say, though my voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. "What are you? You're fired, Emma." He said it simply, like he was ordering coffee. Effective immediately. The words hung in the air like smoke. I looked around the room at faces I knew, people I'd worked alongside, people I'd called friends. Not one of them would meet my eyes. Marcus from engineering studied his laptop screen intensely. Jennifer from marketing suddenly found her phone fascinating. David, who I'd trained myself, who I'd mentored through his first major presentation, looked down at his hands. "On what grounds?" I managed to ask, and I was proud that my voice didn't break. Victor's smile widened. "On the grounds that your recent work has been subpar, your attitude has been problematic, and frankly, Emma, you've become a liability to this organization." A liability. The word echoed in my head. I had 3 patents registered in my name that generated $47 million in annual revenue for this company. I had personally developed the core algorithm that made our flagship product possible. I had pulled this company out of near bankruptcy 2 years ago when their original tech framework collapsed and everyone else was scrambling in the dark. And I was a liability. "The security team will escort you out," Victor continued, already looking down at his papers, dismissing me like I was nothing. "Your personal items will be boxed and sent to you. Your access codes and credentials have already been revoked." That's when I noticed the 2 security guards standing by the door. When had they arrived? Had they been there the whole time, waiting for this moment? "Victor," I said quietly, and something in my tone made him look up, made that smile falter just slightly. "You're making a mistake." He laughed then. Actually laughed, and a few people around the table, cowards, all of them, joined in nervously. "A mistake?" He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease, walking around the table toward me like a shark circling. "The only mistake I made, Emma, was keeping you around this long. You think you're indispensable? You think this company can't function without you?" He stopped right in front of me, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "There are 100 hungry, talented people waiting to take your desk. You've been coasting on old victories for too long. It's time for fresh blood, for people who understand that innovation doesn't mean clinging to the past." Every word was calculated to humiliate, to break me down in front of everyone who mattered. This wasn't just a firing. This was a public execution. I could feel their eyes on me now, everyone in that room watching to see how I'd react, whether I'd cry, whether I'd beg, whether I'd make a scene. I thought about screaming. I thought about throwing something, about demanding explanations, about fighting. But then I thought about something else entirely. A conversation I'd had 6 months ago. A meeting I'd taken on my personal time. A patent application I'd filed under my own name, using my own resources, for technology I'd developed independently on weekends and late nights when everyone else had gone home. Patent number US 2024-78945561B. A revolutionary advancement in quantum data encryption that made everything currently on the market, including Kane Industries' entire product line, completely obsolete. And it was mine. All mine. Victor didn't know about it. Nobody in this room knew about it. I'd kept it separate, kept it clean, kept it locked away because some instinct, some quiet voice in the back of my mind, had whispered that I might need an insurance policy someday. Today was that someday. So instead of screaming, instead of crying, instead of giving Victor Kane the satisfaction of seeing me break, I did something that clearly surprised him. I smiled. "Thank you," I said simply, extending my hand for a handshake. Victor blinked, confusion flickering across his features. He'd expected tears, expected anger, expected something. Not gratitude. "Thank you," he repeated. "Thank you for clarifying where I stand," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. "I appreciate the directness." I saw his eyes narrow, saw him trying to figure out my angle, trying to understand what game I was playing. There was no game. Not yet. But there would be. "Security will show you out," he said finally, recovering his composure, waving his hand dismissively. The guards moved forward, not touching me but making it clear I needed to move. I walked toward the door with my head high, my shoulders back, refusing to give anyone in that room the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. As I reached the doorway, I heard Victor's voice behind me, loud enough for everyone to hear, "And Emma? Don't bother using me as a reference. After this, your reputation in this industry is finished." I didn't turn around. I didn't respond. I just kept walking, through the door, down the hallway with its modern art and floor-to-ceiling windows, past the cubicles where junior employees quickly looked away, pretending they hadn't heard the gossip already spreading through the building like wildfire. Emma got fired. Emma got destroyed in front of everyone. Emma's career is over. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, the guards following me like I was some kind of criminal. As those doors slid shut, as my reflection stared back at me in the polished steel, professional, composed, unbroken, I allowed myself one small smile. Because Victor Kane had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd humiliated me publicly, destroyed my reputation deliberately, ended my career viciously. And in doing so, he'd freed me from any loyalty, any hesitation, any moral obligation to protect the company I'd once loved. The elevator descended, floor numbers ticking down on the digital display. By the time I reached the ground floor, I'd already made my decision. By the time I walked out of that building into the afternoon sunlight, I'd already pulled out my phone. By the time I reached my car in the parking garage, I was already dialing a number I'd saved 6 months ago, a number attached to a name that would make Victor Kane's blood run cold. James Morrison, CEO of Titan Technologies. Kane Industries' biggest competitor. Their most dangerous rival. The company that had been trying to acquire my quantum encryption technology since the moment they'd heard whispers it existed. The phone rang once. Twice. "Emma?" James's voice came through, surprised but pleased. "I didn't expect to hear from you. Are you still interested in patent US 2024-78945561B? I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. A pause. "Then, the quantum encryption breakthrough?" "Absolutely. We've been interested since day one. But last time we spoke, you said, last time we spoke, I was still employed by Kane Industries," I interrupted. "As of approximately 8 minutes ago, that's no longer the case." Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head, calculating, assessing, recognizing the opportunity that had just fallen into his lap. "I see," he said slowly. Emma, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that if you want exclusive rights to technology that will revolutionize data security for the next decade, technology that will make Kane Industries' entire product line look like Stone Age tools, we should meet. Soon. How soon? Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Your office. Done, he said immediately. Emma, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain this patent is yours independently? Because if Kane Industries has any claim, I have all the documentation, I assured him. Timestamps, development logs, personal investment records, everything filed under my name alone using my own resources on my own time. It's clean, James. Completely clean. Then tomorrow morning it is, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. And Emma? I'm sorry about whatever happened today, but I have a feeling it's going to turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. We ended the call and I sat in my car in the dim parking garage, my hands finally starting to shake now that I was alone, now that the adrenaline was beginning to fade. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt like I'd just crossed a line I could never uncross. But mostly I felt something else entirely. Power. For the first time in 7 years, since the day I'd walked into Kane Industries as a bright-eyed junior developer with dreams of changing the world, I held all the cards. Victor had tried to destroy me, tried to humiliate me, tried to end my career. Instead, he'd just given me the perfect weapon to destroy everything he'd built. If you're still with me, if this story has grabbed your attention, please subscribe to my channel because what happens next, what happens when Victor Kane realizes what he's done, is going to blow your mind, and you won't want to miss a single moment of this journey. I drove home in a daze, the city passing by my windows like a movie I wasn't quite part of. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning, coffee cup still in the sink, laptop open on the kitchen table, the presentation I'd been working on still glowing on the screen. A presentation I'd never give now. Work I'd never complete. A future that had evaporated in the span of 15 minutes. I closed the laptop and walked to my window, looking out over the city as the sun began to set, painting everything in shades of orange and red. Somewhere out there, Victor Kane was probably celebrating. Probably taking credit for making a tough decision, for cutting dead weight, for keeping the company lean and competitive. He had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, scrolling back through 6 months of messages until I found what I was looking for. The original patent filing. Date stamp, February 14, 2024. Timestamp, 11:47 p.m. Filed from my home IP address, using my personal credit card to pay the fees, documented with months of development work done entirely on my personal equipment. The technology itself was elegant in its simplicity, a quantum entanglement-based encryption system that generated truly unbreakable codes by linking data points across quantum states. It was science fiction made real, and it had the potential to secure everything from banking systems to military communications to personal devices. And I'd built it alone, in my spare time, because I loved the challenge and because some part of me had always known I needed something of my own. I'd mentioned it once, casually, to Marcus from engineering during a lunch break. Sounds cool, he'd said, barely looking up from his phone. You should tell Victor about it. I almost had. I'd scheduled a meeting twice, drafted the presentation 3 times. But something always stopped me. Maybe it was the way Victor had taken credit for my quantum algorithm 2 years ago, presenting it to investors as his vision, his innovation. Maybe it was the way he'd denied me the promotion I deserved, giving it instead to someone with better connections and fewer qualifications. Maybe it was just instinct. Whatever the reason, I'd kept patent 7894561B to myself, and now that decision was about to change everything. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Sarah, who worked in a completely different industry and had no idea what had happened today. Dinner tomorrow night? That Thai place you love? I stared at the message, trying to decide how to respond, whether to tell her now or wait until tomorrow, whether to admit that I'd been fired, that my career had imploded, that everything I'd worked for had been stripped away in front of everyone I knew. Instead, I typed, "Can't tomorrow." Major business meeting. Rain check? Her response came immediately, "Ooh, mysterious. You're not allowed to be more successful than me, it's in the friendship contract." If only she knew. I set the phone down and walked to my home office, really just the second bedroom converted with a desk and some shelves, where I kept my personal development workstation. 3 monitors, high-end processor, secure cloud backup, everything I needed. I logged in and pulled up my files on the quantum encryption project, scrolling through thousands of hours of work, of trial and error, of breakthrough moments at 3 in the morning when coffee and determination were the only things keeping me going. This was mine. Every line of code, every mathematical proof, every iteration and improvement. Mine in a way that nothing at Kane Industries had ever truly been mine. And tomorrow, I was going to sell it for enough money to never worry about vindictive CEOs or corporate politics ever again. I pulled up the preliminary valuation James Morrison's team had done 6 months ago when they'd first approached me. Conservative estimate, $1.2 billion. Aggressive estimate, $1.8 billion. And that was before recent developments had made quantum encryption even more valuable, even more essential to companies desperate to stay ahead in an increasingly digital world. I could probably push for $1.5 billion and James would accept it without hesitation. $1.5 billion. The number was so large it barely seemed real, like monopoly money, like something that happened to other people in news articles, not to 32-year-old software engineers who'd just been publicly humiliated and fired. But it was real. And it was going to happen. I spent the rest of the evening preparing, pulling together every document, every timestamp, every piece of evidence that proved the patent was independently developed and wholly owned by me. By midnight, I had everything organized in a secure digital folder, backed up 3 times, ready to present. By 1 a.m., I'd rehearsed my pitch 4 times, trying different approaches, different angles, finally settling on straightforward confidence because that's what James would respect. By 2 a.m., I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, too wired to sleep despite my exhaustion. And by 3 a.m., I was back at my computer, looking at Kane Industries' stock price. Trading had closed at $147.23 per share. Market cap, roughly $8.6 billion. Profit margins heavily dependent on their data security products. Products that would become worthless the moment Titan Technologies announced they'd acquired exclusive rights to quantum encryption technology that made everything else obsolete. I ran some quick calculations, conservative numbers based on market response and competitive advantage. Kane Industries stock would probably drop by at least 30% within the first week. That was $2.5 billion in market value, evaporated. Victor Kane personally owned approximately 12% of the company. That was roughly $300 million of his personal wealth, gone. And that was just the beginning, because once Titan Technologies started rolling out products using my quantum encryption, once they started dominating market share, once they started acquiring Kane Industries clients, the damage would compound. Quarterly losses would mount. Investor confidence would crumble. Within a year, maybe 2, Kane Industries would be a fraction of its current size, struggling to survive in a market they'd once dominated. And it would all trace back to one decision. One moment of cruelty. One CEO's arrogance in firing the wrong person. Sleep finally came around 4 a.m., and when it did, I dreamed of boardrooms and falling stock prices and Victor Kane's face when he realized what he'd done. My alarm went off at 7. I'd set it for 6:30 but apparently hit snooze without remembering, a dangerous habit on a day like today. I showered quickly, the hot water helping to clear the fog from my brain, washing away the exhaustion and replacing it with sharp focus. Clothes were important today. I needed to look professional but not like I was trying too hard, confident but not aggressive, someone James Morrison would respect as an equal, not as a desperate former employee looking for any lifeline. I settled on a charcoal gray suit, expensive but understated, tailored perfectly because I'd learned years ago that investing in good clothes was worth it, paired with a simple white blouse and modest heels. Professional armor. I pulled my dark hair back into a neat bun, applied minimal makeup, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me didn't look like someone who'd been fired yesterday. She looked like someone about to close the deal of a lifetime. I grabbed my bag, leather, professional, containing my laptop and all the documentation I'd need, and headed out, stopping only briefly for coffee because my hands were shaking slightly and I needed something to hold, something to keep me grounded. The drive to Titan Technologies headquarters took 40 minutes through morning traffic. Their building was impressive, all glass and steel, modern architecture that screamed success and innovation, rising 48 floors into the sky with their logo visible from blocks away. I parked in the visitor section and sat in my car for a moment, taking deep breaths, centering myself. This was it. The moment everything changed. No going back after this. I walked into the lobby at 8:53, giving myself 7 minutes of buffer time. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect hair and a professional smile, looked up expectantly. "I'm Emma Chen," I said. "I have a 9 o'clock meeting with Mr. Morrison." Recognition flickered in her eyes. James must have flagged this as important. "Of course, Ms. Chen. Mr. Morrison is expecting you. Please take the executive elevator to the 45th floor. His assistant will meet you there." The executive elevator. Not the regular banks of elevators where employees crowded in discussing their mornings and their projects. A private elevator that opened only with a key card, that moved smoothly and quickly, that deposited me directly into an executive reception area that probably cost more to furnish than most people's houses. James Morrison's assistant was waiting, an efficient-looking man in his late 40s who introduced himself as Robert and led me through hallways that smelled like new carpet and ambition. We passed conference rooms where meetings were already underway, offices with closed doors and important names on plaques, glass walls that looked out over the city sprawling beneath us. And then we reached James Morrison's office. Robert knocked once, opened the door, and announced me like I was royalty. "Ms. Emma Chen, sir." James stood from behind his desk, a massive thing made of dark wood and glass that probably weighed more than my car, and crossed the room with his hand extended. He was younger than Victor, maybe early 40s, with dark hair graying at the temples and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Emma," he said warmly, shaking my hand firmly. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." He gestured to a seating area by the windows, leather chairs, a glass coffee table, the kind of casual meeting space that still managed to scream power and success. I sat, placing my bag beside me, acutely aware that this was happening, that I was really doing this. "Can I get you anything?" Robert asked from the doorway. "Coffee? Water?" "Water would be great," I said, my throat suddenly dry. Robert disappeared and James sat across from me, leaning back casually but watching me with intense focus. "I'm not going to waste your time with small talk," he said. "You're here because you have something I want, and I'm here because I can give you something you want. Let's talk specifics. Direct." I appreciated that. "Patent US 2024-78945561B, I said, pulling out my tablet and bringing up the technical specifications. "Quantum entanglement-based encryption system, independently developed, fully functional prototype tested and verified. It generates unbreakable encryption codes by linking data points across quantum states, making it theoretically impossible to intercept or decode without collapsing the quantum superposition." I slid the tablet across to him and watched as he scrolled through the technical documentation, his eyes scanning quickly but comprehensively. He was technical enough to understand what he was looking at. That was good. It meant I didn't have to dumb anything down, didn't have to translate science into business speak. "This is remarkable," he said after several minutes. "You built this alone?" every line of code, every algorithm, every hardware configuration. On my own time, using my own equipment, funded entirely out of pocket. I have timestamps, development logs, expenditure records, everything you need to verify independent ownership. Robert returned with water and quietly set it on the table before disappearing again. James continued reading, occasionally making small sounds of interest or approval. Finally, he looked up. Your preliminary valuation 6 months ago was between 1.2 and 1.8 billion, he said. Given recent market developments and increased demand for quantum encryption, I'd say those numbers are conservative now. What are you asking? This was the moment. The number I said next would determine everything. Too high and he might walk away, might decide it wasn't worth the risk. Too low and I'd be leaving money on the table, money I deserved, money that represented 7 years of my life sacrificed to a company that had thrown me away like garbage. 1.5 billion, I said clearly. Exclusive rights, full technology transfer, all documentation and prototypes included. I'll provide 6 months of consultation to ensure smooth implementation, and I'll sign a standard non-compete agreement that doesn't restrict my broader career options. James didn't flinch at the number. Didn't hesitate or negotiate or try to talk me down. Instead, he smiled. Done, he said simply. I'll have our legal team draft the contracts by end of business today. We can sign tomorrow if everything checks out, which I'm confident it will. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. $1.5 billion. Just like that. One word, done. There is one thing you should know, I said, because I needed to be honest, needed everything to be completely clean and above board. Kane Industries will find out about this quickly. Probably within days. They're going to be unhappy. James laughed, actually laughed, like I'd told him the funniest joke he'd heard all year. Emma, he said, leaning forward with genuine amusement dancing in his eyes, Kane Industries has been a thorn in my side for 15 years. Victor Kane has personally cost me 3 major contracts, 2 key employees, and more money than I care to calculate. If this deal makes him unhappy, that's not a problem. That's a bonus. He stood and walked to his desk, pulling out a business card and writing something on the back before handing it to me. That's my personal cell, he said. If anyone from Kane Industries contacts you, threatens you, or tries to interfere with this deal in any way, you call me immediately. I'll have our legal team handling the acquisition, and they're very, very good at what they do. I took the card, feeling the weight of it in my hand, heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of business card that cost more per piece than most people's lunches. There's a meeting this afternoon with our legal team, our technical assessment team, and our financial people, James continued. Can you be back here at 2 p.m.? I want to get this moving fast, before anyone has a chance to complicate things. I'll be here, I confirmed. We shook hands again and Robert appeared as if summoned by telepathy, ready to escort me out. As I walked back through those halls, back down in that private elevator, back out into the sunlight where the city was just starting its day, I felt like I was floating. $1.5 billion. The number kept repeating in my head like a mantra, like something I needed to keep reminding myself was real. I sat in my car and pulled out my phone, my hands shaking slightly from adrenaline and disbelief. Part of me wanted to call someone, wanted to share this moment, wanted to scream the news to anyone who would listen. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until the contracts were signed and the deal was final and there was no way for anyone to interfere or sabotage or steal this away from me. Instead, I drove home and spent the next few hours reviewing every document, every piece of evidence, every detail that James's teams would be examining this afternoon. I needed to be perfect. I needed to give them absolutely no reason to doubt, no excuse to lower the price, no opening to find problems. At 1:30, I headed back to Titan Technologies, arriving 15 minutes early because punctuality mattered and first impressions mattered and everything about today needed to be flawless. The afternoon meeting lasted 4 hours. Lawyers asked questions about ownership and development timeline and whether anyone else had access to the technology or my research. Technical specialists dove deep into the code, testing the prototype, running simulations, verifying that everything worked exactly as specified. Financial analysts ran numbers and projections and market analysis, calculating ROI and competitive advantage and strategic value. And through it all, I answered every question clearly and confidently, because I knew my work, knew my technology, knew that everything I'd claimed was absolutely true and verifiable. By 6 p.m., they were satisfied. By 6:30, James was shaking my hand again and telling me the contracts would be ready for review by tomorrow morning. By 7, I was back in my car, exhausted but electrified, my phone buzzing with an email notification. Draft contract attached. Review at your convenience. Signing scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow if all terms acceptable. I sat in the parking garage and opened the attachment, scrolling through pages of legal language, of clauses and stipulations and protections. But the important parts were clear. Purchase price, $1.5 billion US payment terms, $750 million upon signing, $750 million upon successful technology transfer and verification exclusive rights, granted to Titan Technologies in perpetuity non-compete, standard 5-year restriction on directly competing quantum encryption technologies, no restrictions on other fields of work consultation period, 6 months at $50,000 per month. The numbers were so large they looked fake, like someone had added too many zeros by mistake. But they were real. This was real. I drove home in a daze, ordered takeout because cooking seemed impossible, and spent the evening on my couch with my laptop, reading and rereading the contract, making small notes and clarifications that I'd discuss with my own lawyer tomorrow morning before signing. Because I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to sign a $1.5 billion contract without legal review, even if everything looked perfect. I'd contacted a lawyer weeks ago, back when I'd first started considering this possibility, a specialist in intellectual property and technology transfers who came highly recommended and charged accordingly. He'd review the contract tomorrow at 8 a.m., giving me 2 hours to make any necessary adjustments before the 10 o'clock signing. Everything was falling into place. Everything was happening exactly as it should. And somewhere across the city, Victor Kane had no idea that his world was about to end. I slept better that night than I had in years. No anxiety dreams, no waking up at 3 a.m. with my mind racing, no tossing and turning and second-guessing every decision. Just deep, peaceful sleep, the kind that comes from knowing you've made the right choice, from knowing that everything is about to change for the better. My alarm went off at 6:30 and I actually felt rested for the first time in forever. The morning routine was familiar now: shower, coffee, professional clothes, careful makeup. I met with my lawyer at 8 at his downtown office, a space filled with law books and mahogany furniture that screamed old money and establishment respect. His name was David Chen, no relation, just coincidence, and he was exactly the kind of lawyer you wanted reviewing billion-dollar contracts, methodical, careful, paranoid about details. He read through everything twice, made notes in the margins, asked questions about clauses and implications and potential future scenarios. By 9:15, he looked up with a satisfied expression. "It's clean," he said. "Very clean, actually. Titan Technologies has been remarkably fair with terms. The only minor adjustment I'd suggest is clarifying the scope of your consultation obligations. We want to make sure they can't monopolize all your time for 6 months without reasonable boundaries." We drafted the clarification together, sent it to James Morrison's legal team, and received approval within 20 minutes. By 9:50, I was back in my car heading to Titan Technologies. By 9:58, I was in James Morrison's office, legal teams on both sides present, contracts printed and ready. At exactly 10 a.m., I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. My mind was clear. And I signed my name on the line that would transfer exclusive rights to patent US 2024-78945561B to Titan Technologies for the sum of $1.5 billion. James signed across from me, and then the lawyers signed as witnesses, and then it was done. Official. Irreversible. Congratulations, James said, shaking my hand warmly. You're about to become very wealthy, and we're about to become very dominant in the market. I'd say this is a win-win. When will you announce the acquisition? I asked, because that was the question that mattered most. When would Victor Kane find out what he'd lost? We'll coordinate a press release for Monday morning, James said, checking his calendar. That gives us the weekend to prepare the announcement, brief our marketing team, and get ahead of the news cycle. By Monday afternoon, every tech journal and business publication in the country will be covering this. Monday. 3 days away. 3 days for Victor Kane to walk around in blissful ignorance, probably still congratulating himself on firing me, probably still thinking he'd made a smart business decision. I thanked everyone, collected my copies of the signed contracts, and walked out of that building with $750 million being wired to my account even as I stepped into the elevator. The second payment would come in 6 months, after the technology transfer was complete and verified. But $750 million was more than enough to be getting on with. I drove home, parked in my usual spot, walked into my apartment, closed the door behind me, and just stood there in the silence. My phone buzzed. A notification from my bank. Wire transfer received. Available balance, $750 million.00. I stared at the screen, at those numbers, at proof that this wasn't a dream or a fantasy or wishful thinking. This was real. I was a billionaire. At 32 years old, I was independently wealthy beyond anything I'd ever imagined, financially secure for the rest of my life, freed from ever worrying about jobs or bosses or corporate politics ever again. And it was all because Victor Kane had made one catastrophic mistake. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated and powerful and satisfied. Instead, I felt something quieter, something more complex. Relief, maybe. Or justice. Or just the strange calm that comes after a storm, when everything is settled and done and there's nothing left but to wait and see what comes next. I spent Friday afternoon doing nothing. Just sitting on my couch, drinking wine that was probably too expensive for an afternoon at home, but who cared, watching sunlight move across my living room walls and thinking about how much had changed in just 48 hours. Saturday I spent planning. Making lists of things I needed to do now that money wasn't an object, move to a better apartment, buy a reliable car, set up investments and trusts and charitable foundations because having this much money came with responsibility. I called my lawyer and set up a meeting for next week to discuss asset protection and tax strategy and all the boring practical things that came with sudden wealth. I called my accountant, a small firm guy who'd done my taxes for years, and told him he might want to sit down before looking at my account balance, and could he recommend someone who specialized in high-net-worth clients because this was definitely outside his usual scope. He laughed, congratulated me, and promised to send referrals. Sunday I saw Sarah for brunch, and she immediately knew something was different. Okay, she said, pointing her fork at me across the table at our favorite cafe. Spill. You're being weird. I'm not being weird, I protested, though I was definitely being weird. You're absolutely being weird. You have this. She gestured vaguely at my face, look. Like you know something. What's going on? I'd planned to wait until the announcement went public, but looking at my best friend, the person who'd been there through every victory and every defeat of the last 10 years, I couldn't keep it in. If I tell you something, you have to promise not to tell anyone, I said. Not a single person, not even your mom, not until Monday when it's officially public. Her eyes went wide. Oh my God, you're pregnant. What? No. You're getting married. Sarah, you won a lottery. You're secretly a superhero. You discovered aliens. I sold a patent for $1.5 billion, I said quietly, and watched her face go through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion. Disbelief. Shock. Comprehension. More shock. You what? So I told her everything. The firing, the humiliation, the patent I'd kept secret, the meeting with James Morrison, the signing yesterday morning. By the end of it, her mouth was hanging open and her pancakes were completely forgotten. Emma, she said slowly, like she was talking to someone who might be delusional, are you telling me that you're a billionaire? I guess technically yes, I admitted. Though it doesn't feel real yet. Doesn't feel real? Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Emma, that's an insane amount of money. That's private jet money. That's buy a small island money. That's never work again money. I know. And Victor Kane has no idea? Not yet, I said, and couldn't help the small smile that crossed my face. But he will tomorrow. Sarah sat back in her chair, processing, her eyes distant. Then slowly, a smile spread across her face, not a polite smile or a friendly smile, but something fierce and satisfied. He fired you, she said. He humiliated you in front of everyone. And now you're about to destroy his entire company. I'm not destroying anything, I corrected, though the words felt hollow even as I said them. I'm just doing business. Making a smart deal. It's not personal. Sarah looked at me with the expression she reserved for when I was lying to myself. Emma. It's completely personal. And you know what? He deserves it. That man has been taking credit for your work for years. You told me stories, the algorithm he presented as his own, the promotion he gave to someone else, the way he talked down to you in meetings. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. You earned this, she said firmly. Not just the money, though holy hell, that money, but the satisfaction of watching him realize what he threw away. Don't feel guilty about it. But I did feel guilty, at least a little. Because even though Victor had been terrible, even though he'd wronged me repeatedly, even though he deserved consequences for his actions, what I was about to do would affect more than just him. Kane Industries employed 4,000 people. 4,000 people with families, with mortgages, with lives that depended on that company staying successful. When Titan Technologies' announcement hit tomorrow, when Kane Industries' stock price collapsed and contracts started moving to competitors and the company started hemorrhaging money, those 4,000 people would suffer too. You're thinking about the employees, Sarah said, reading my face like she always could. I nodded. They didn't do anything wrong. Most of them are good people just trying to do their jobs. And when Kane Industries starts failing, stop, Sarah interrupted. First of all, you don't know that the company will fail. Maybe it takes a hit and recovers. Maybe Victor pulls off some miracle turnaround. But second, and more importantly, none of that is your responsibility. She squeezed my hand. You didn't create this situation. Victor did. He chose to fire you publicly and cruelly. He chose to make an enemy instead of an ally. Whatever happens now is on him, not you. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to accept that I wasn't responsible for the consequences of selling my own technology, my own work, to whoever I chose. But the guilt lingered anyway, settling in my stomach like a stone. We finished brunch with Sarah asking a million questions about what I was going to do with the money, where I was going to live, whether I'd still work or just retire and travel the world. I didn't have answers to most of them. Everything had happened so fast that I hadn't had time to think beyond the immediate future, beyond tomorrow's announcement and the fallout that would follow. Sunday evening I spent alone in my apartment, watching the sun set over the city, thinking about tomorrow. Somewhere out there, Victor Kane was probably having dinner with his family, or working late at the office, or doing whatever wealthy CEOs did on Sunday evenings. And he had no idea that tomorrow morning would destroy him. I should have felt powerful. Instead, I just felt tired. I went to bed early, set my alarm for 7, and lay in the dark waiting for sleep that took a long time to come. When it finally did, I dreamed of boardrooms and falling buildings and Victor Kane's face twisted in rage. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the smell of rain. I made coffee and turned on my laptop, pulling up the financial news sites that would break the story. The press release was scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern Time, which meant 6 a.m. here on the West Coast. I had 3 hours to wait. 3 hours to second-guess everything, to wonder if I'd made the right choice, to imagine Victor's reaction when he found out. At 8:30, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Emma Chen? A woman's voice, professional and brisk. Yes? This is Rachel Kim from TechCrunch. I'm calling about the announcement Titan Technologies is making this morning regarding their acquisition of quantum encryption technology. I understand you're the developer who sold them the patent? My heart started racing. I can't comment on that, I said carefully, remembering what James Morrison's legal team had told me about media inquiries. Off the record then, Rachel pressed. Is it true you were just fired from Kane Industries? Word had spread fast. Too fast. Where did you hear that? I asked. I have sources at Kane. They're saying Victor Kane fired you Friday morning in front of the executive team. Is that accurate? I closed my eyes, weighing my options. Rachel Kim was one of the most respected tech journalists in the industry. If I played this right, I could control the narrative. If I played it wrong, I could look vindictive and petty. On the record, I said finally, making my decision, I am no longer employed by Kane Industries. My patent for quantum encryption technology was developed independently, on my own time, using my own resources. The timing of my departure from Kane and the sale to Titan Technologies is coincidental. It was a lie, of course. The timing wasn't coincidental at all. But it was the right lie, the professional lie, the lie that made me look like a businesswoman making smart decisions rather than someone out for revenge. And off the record? Rachel asked. I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. Off the record? Victor Kane made the biggest mistake of his career when he underestimated me. Rachel laughed, a sound of genuine delight. That's going to make a great quote if you ever let me use it. Thank you, Emma. I think this story is going to be very interesting to follow. We ended the call and I sat staring at my phone, my hands shaking slightly. It was happening. The story was breaking. And there was no stopping it now. At 9 a.m., my phone started buzzing constantly. Notifications from news sites, from social media, from industry publications. All with the same headline, slightly different variations. Titan Technologies acquires revolutionary quantum encryption patent for undisclosed some game-changing encryption technology moves TO Titan Tech former Kane Industries engineer sells breakthrough patent TO rival company. I clicked on one article and read, Titan Technologies announced today the acquisition of exclusive rights to patent US 2024-78945561B, a quantum entanglement-based encryption system that industry experts are calling revolutionary and potentially market-defining. The patent was developed by Emma Chen, a former senior engineer at Kane Industries who recently departed the company. While financial terms were not disclosed, sources close to the deal suggest the acquisition price was in excess of $1 billion. My phone rang again. James Morrison this time. Have you seen the coverage? He asked, sounding pleased. Hard to miss it, I said. It's better than we expected. The tech journals are going crazy, our stock is up 8% in pre-market trading. And I've already had 3 calls from major clients interested in being early adopters of the new encryption system. He paused. Kane Industries stock is down 14% and falling. There it was. The first real damage. 14% of $8.6 billion was roughly $1.2 billion in market value, evaporated in the first few hours of trading. How's Victor taking it? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. No idea yet, but I imagine we'll find out soon. Emma, I want you to know that you made the right decision. This technology is going to change everything, and you deserve to be compensated accordingly. We talked for a few more minutes about next steps and implementation timeline and consultation scheduling, and then he had to go deal with the flood of media requests and business inquiries. I sat on my couch, watching the news coverage roll in, watching Kane Industries' stock price continue to drop, watching the tech world react to what was already being called one of the biggest patent acquisitions of the decade. And then, at 10:30 a.m., my phone rang with a number I recognized. Kane Industries' main office line. I stared at it, watching it ring, trying to decide if I wanted to answer. On the fourth ring, I picked up. Hello? Emma. Victor Kane's voice, tight with barely controlled fury. What the hell have you done? His tone was so different from Friday morning, no false warmth now, no casual dismissal, no arrogant superiority. Just rage, and underneath it, something that might have been fear. I sold my patent, I said calmly. It's called business, Victor. I thought you'd understand. That technology should have been ours, he snarled. You developed it while working for Kane Industries. We have a claim. No, you don't, I interrupted. I have documentation proving every aspect of development occurred on my personal time, using my personal equipment, funded by my personal resources. Your lawyers can review it if you'd like, but they'll tell you the same thing mine did. The patent is mine, free and clear. You did this on purpose, he said, his voice dropping to something cold and venomous. You planned this. You knew exactly what you were doing when you sold to Titan. I made a business decision, I replied. The same way you made a business decision when you fired me Friday morning. The difference is, my decision was smart. I heard him take a sharp breath, heard papers rustling in the background, heard other voices, muffled, urgent. You're destroying this company, he said. 4,000 people work here, Emma. 4,000 people whose livelihoods depend on Kane Industries staying competitive. Are you really willing to hurt all of them just to get back at me? The guilt I'd been feeling sharpened, twisted in my stomach. He was right about that part, at least. But he was also trying to manipulate me, trying to make me feel responsible for consequences he'd set in motion. Those 4,000 people work for a CEO who makes terrible decisions, I said quietly. A CEO who fires his best talent out of ego and arrogance. A CEO who's so concerned with looking powerful that he doesn't recognize value when it's sitting right in front of him. I paused, letting that sink in. You created this situation, Victor. Not me. You could have kept me on staff. You could have given me the recognition and compensation I deserved. You could have been a decent human being. Instead, you chose to humiliate me publicly. Well, congratulations. Now the whole world knows exactly what that decision cost you. You're going to regret this, he said, and his voice had gone from fury to something colder, more calculated. I have lawyers, Emma. I have resources. I will tie you up in litigation for years. I will make sure that patent never sees the light of day. You'll do nothing, I interrupted, because you have no legal standing. And because Titan Technologies has better lawyers than you do, and they're very, very motivated to protect their $1.5 billion investment. Silence on the other end. I could practically hear his mind working, calculating, realizing the full scope of what he was facing. $1.5 billion, he repeated slowly. They paid you $1.5 billion. That's right. More silence, longer this time. We could have paid you that, he said finally, and for the first time he sounded less angry and more defeated. If you'd brought it to us, If you'd given us a chance to make an offer, you had 7 years to give me chances, I said. 7 years to recognize my value, to treat me with respect, to compensate me fairly. You chose not to. You chose to take credit for my work, to deny me promotions, and finally to fire me as publicly and humiliatingly as possible. I took a breath, steadying myself. So no, Victor. You couldn't have paid me $1.5 billion. Because by the time I was willing to sell, you'd already made sure I'd never sell to you. Emma, he started, but I didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to hear apologies or excuses or attempts to smooth things over. It was too late for any of that. Goodbye, Victor, I said, and ended the call. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. But underneath the adrenaline and anxiety, I felt something else. Closure. Or maybe just the satisfaction of having said everything I'd wanted to say, of having stood my ground, of having made Victor Kane finally understand that actions have consequences. I turned off my phone and sat in silence, listening to the rain that had started falling outside, watching water streak down my windows. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of media coverage and analysis and speculation. By afternoon, Kane Industries stock had dropped 23%. By market close, it was down 28% and still volatile. Financial analysts were calling it one of the most dramatic single-day losses in the tech sector in years. Industry experts were weighing in on what this meant for Kane Industries' future, whether they could recover, whether Victor Kane's leadership would survive this disaster. And tech journalists were digging into my background, into my history with Kane Industries, piecing together a narrative of undervalued talent and corporate short-sightedness and spectacular revenge. I ignored most of it, spent the evening reading a novel I'd been meaning to get to for months, ordered Thai food because I could afford any Thai food I wanted now, went to bed early. Tuesday morning brought more coverage, more analysis, more fallout. Kane Industries issued a statement saying they were exploring all legal options regarding the patent, which was corporate speak for "we're desperate but don't want to admit it." Titan Technologies issued a counter-statement saying they welcomed any legal review because they were completely confident in the legitimacy of their acquisition. And somewhere in all of that, a few journalists started asking questions about the timing of my departure from Kane Industries and whether it was related to the patent sale. I got a call from Rachel Kim again. "Emma, I'm working on a longer feature piece about this whole situation," she said. "And I've been talking to people at Kane Industries." Several employees, who spoke on condition of anonymity, confirmed that Victor Kane fired you Friday morning in front of the executive team. I didn't say anything, just listened. They also said he was deliberately cruel about it, Rachel continued. Publicly humiliating. One person described it as unnecessary and vindictive. She paused. "I'm not trying to make you into a revenge story," she said. "But the timing is hard to ignore. And honestly, I think a lot of people in the tech industry would love to hear about an engineer standing up to a toxic CEO and winning. I didn't do it for revenge," I said, which was mostly true. I did it because it was good business. Titan Technologies made the best offer for technology I'd developed independently. The fact that it happened to devastate Kane Industries is unfortunate, but not my primary motivation. "But you're not sad about it," Rachel observed. I smiled. "No," I admitted. "I'm not sad about it." The article published Wednesday morning. It was titled "How One Patent Sale Became a Masterclass in Professional Revenge," and it was thorough, well-researched, and absolutely devastating to Victor Kane's reputation. Rachel had interviewed dozens of current and former Kane Industries employees, and the picture that emerged was of a CEO who regularly took credit for others' work, who created a toxic culture of fear and competition, who valued loyalty over competence and ego over results. She detailed my 7 years at the company, the patents I'd developed that generated millions in revenue, the promotions I'd been denied, the recognition I'd never received. And she described the firing, confirmed by multiple witnesses, as an act of gratuitous cruelty that backfired spectacularly. The tech world ate it up. Within hours, Emma Chin was trending on social media. People were calling me a hero, an inspiration, a symbol of standing up to corporate abuse. Others were debating the ethics of what I'd done, whether it was justified revenge or unprofessional pettiness. But everyone was talking about it. Everyone was reading the story. And Kane Industries' reputation was taking hit after hit after hit. By Wednesday afternoon, 2 major clients had publicly announced they were moving their business to Titan Technologies. By Wednesday evening, 3 senior executives had resigned from Kane Industries. By Thursday morning, there were calls from shareholders for Victor Kane to step down as CEO. I watched it all unfold from my apartment, feeling like I was observing a natural disaster from a safe distance, terrible and destructive, but also somehow inevitable, like forces that had been building for years were finally being released. Thursday afternoon, I got an unexpected visitor. My building's front desk called up. "Miss Chen? There's a David Harrison here to see you. He says he's from Kane Industries' legal department?" David Harrison. I knew that name. He was Kane Industries' chief legal counsel, a sharp lawyer who'd been with the company for over a decade. "Send him up," I said, curious despite myself. 5 minutes later, I opened my door to find a man in his 50s, gray-haired and professionally dressed, looking tired and stressed. "Miss Chen," he said. "Thank you for seeing me." "I know this is irregular, it's fine," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Would you like coffee?" "That would be wonderful, actually." I made coffee while he sat at my kitchen table, and I could feel him trying to figure out how to start whatever conversation he'd come here to have. Finally, I sat down across from him and waited. "I'm not here in an official capacity," David said carefully. "This conversation is off the record, and I'm not recording anything. I'm here because, well, frankly, because the company is in crisis and I'm trying to figure out if there's any way to salvage the situation." "There isn't," I said simply. "I was afraid you'd say that." He took a sip of coffee, gathering his thoughts. "Emma, and I hope it's okay if I call you Emma, I want you to know that several of us in the company argued against your termination. We told Victor it was a mistake. We told him you were too valuable to lose. But he didn't listen." "He didn't listen," David confirmed. "And now we're dealing with the consequences. Stock price in free fall, clients jumping ship, executive exodus, shareholder revolt. The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss Victor's future with the company." He looked at me directly. "I need to know if you're planning any further actions against Kane Industries. More patents, more deals with competitors, anything we should be preparing for." I thought about it, really thought about it. Did I want to keep hurting Kane Industries? Did I want to watch the company burn until there was nothing left? Or was this enough? "I have no further plans," I said honestly. The patent I sold to Titan was the only quantum encryption technology one developed. I have no other patents, no other secrets, nothing else to sell or leverage. David's shoulders sagged with visible relief. "Thank you for being honest about that. It helps us plan, at least." "But David," I added, "even without me doing anything else, Kane Industries is going to struggle. Titan Technologies has exclusive rights to technology that makes your entire product line obsolete. That's not revenge. That's just market reality." "I know," he said quietly. "We're already looking at restructuring options, possible pivots, alternative revenue streams. But it's going to be a rough few years." He finished his coffee and stood. "For what it's worth," he said at the door, "I think you were treated terribly. Victor's management style has been a problem for years, but no one had the power or the courage to stand up to him. Maybe this will finally force some necessary changes." After he left, I thought about that. Maybe my revenge would actually lead to something positive, a better company culture, better leadership, better treatment of employees. Or maybe I was just rationalizing, trying to make myself feel better about the destruction I'd caused. Friday brought the news I'd been half expecting. Victor Kane was stepping down as CEO of Kane Industries, effective immediately. The board had forced him out, citing loss of confidence and failure of leadership. He'd released a statement that was professionally bland, talking about spending more time with family and pursuing other opportunities, but everyone knew the truth. He'd been fired. Just like he'd fired me. The symmetry was almost poetic. I should have felt triumphant. Should have felt vindicated and satisfied and complete. Instead, I just felt empty. Like I'd been running on adrenaline and anger for so long that now, with the goal achieved and the revenge complete, there was nothing left but exhaustion. I spent the weekend alone, thinking about what came next. I had more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I had no job, no obligations, no responsibilities. I could do anything, go anywhere, become anyone. The freedom was overwhelming. And terrifying. Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the announcement that had changed everything, I got a call from James Morrison. "Emma," he said warmly. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly? I'm not sure," I admitted. "That's understandable. It's been an intense week." He paused. "I'm calling because I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." Titan Technologies is forming a new division focused entirely on quantum encryption applications, security systems, data protection, communications infrastructure. We're calling it Titan Quantum. And I want you to head it up. I sat up straighter. Head it up? As in? Chief Technical Officer of the division. You'd have complete autonomy over research direction, hiring, budget allocation. You'd be building the team from scratch, developing applications for the technology you created. And obviously, the compensation would be substantial. We're talking executive-level salary plus equity. My mind was racing. A week ago, I'd been fired and humiliated. Now I was being offered a C-suite position at one of the biggest tech companies in the world. "I thought I was done with corporate politics," I said slowly. "This isn't corporate politics," James countered. "This is you doing what you love, creating cutting-edge technology, but with unlimited resources and none of the credit stealing or toxic management. You'd be your own boss, essentially. I'd be hands-off as long as results kept coming." It was tempting. More than tempting. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course. Take your time. But Emma? You're brilliant. Don't let one bad experience with Victor Kane convince you that you're done contributing to the field. The world needs what you can create." After we hung up, I sat thinking about his offer. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to get back to work, back to creating, back to doing what I was good at. But another part of me needed time, needed space, needed to process everything that had happened before jumping into something new. I spent Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop, laptop open, doing something I hadn't done in years. Just creating. Not for work, not for profit, not for anyone but myself. I pulled up a blank code editor and started playing with ideas, algorithms, theoretical frameworks that had been bouncing around in my head for months. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Joy. Pure, simple joy in the act of creation, in solving puzzles, in making something elegant and beautiful and functional. This was why I'd gotten into engineering in the first place, before deadlines and presentations and corporate ladders had complicated everything. I worked until the coffee shop closed, then went home and worked until 3 in the morning, lost in the flow of it, my mind clicking and whirring and connecting dots. Wednesday morning, I woke up with new code filling my screen and a decision made. I called James Morrison. "I'll take the position," I said. "But I have some conditions." "Name them." "First, I want the division to be physically separate from the main Titan Technologies campus. Different building, different culture, like a startup within the larger company. Done. Second, I want full hiring authority. No corporate HR approvals, no politics about diversity metrics or internal candidates. I hire the best people, period. Done. Third, I want a guarantee in writing that any technology one develop for Titan Quantum is jointly owned. The company gets commercial rights, but I retain the underlying IP for academic publication and personal use. James hesitated on that one. That's unusual. It's non-negotiable, I said firmly. I'm never putting myself in a position where someone else completely controls my work again. A long pause. Then, done. I'll have legal draft it today. We hammered out the remaining details, salary, equity, timeline, budget, and by Wednesday afternoon, I had a new job that came with freedom I'd never had before and resources I'd never dreamed of. I started immediately, spending Thursday looking at office spaces, Friday interviewing recruiters who could help build my team, the following Monday making offers to 3 brilliant engineers I'd been following for years. And slowly, gradually, I started to feel like myself again. Not the beaten down, undervalued version of myself I'd been at Kane Industries. Not the revenge-focused, angry version I'd been for that brief, intense week. But someone new. Someone who'd learned hard lessons about standing up for herself, about knowing her worth, about not accepting mistreatment just because it came from someone with power. 3 months later, I was in my new office, sleek, modern, overlooking the bay, when my assistant knocked on my door. Emma? There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Who is it? Victor Kane. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since that phone call the morning after the announcement. Hadn't wanted to. But now he was here, in my building, asking to see me. Give me 5 minutes, I said. Then send him in. I used those 5 minutes to compose myself, to remember that I was in my own space now, my own territory, and he had no power over me anymore. When Victor walked through my door, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked older, more worn, like the last 3 months had aged him years. His expensive suit didn't quite fit right anymore, like he'd lost weight and hadn't bothered to have it tailored. His confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. Emma, he said, standing awkwardly just inside the doorway. Thank you for seeing me. Have a seat, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. He sat, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. I'm sure you've heard, he said finally, but Kane Industries is being acquired. Merged, technically, with our biggest investor taking controlling interest. I'm completely out. No board seat, no advisory role, nothing. I heard, I confirmed. I'm sorry. And surprisingly, I meant it. Not sorry that he'd faced consequences, he deserved those. But sorry that it had come to this, that a company I'd once cared about had been gutted and sold off piece by piece. I came here to apologize, Victor said, and the words seemed to cost him something. What I did to you was wrong. The way I fired you was cruel and unnecessary. I let my ego override my judgment, and it cost me everything. He looked around my office, taking in the space, the success, the evidence of everything I'd built in his absence. You deserved better, he continued. You deserved recognition and respect and compensation that matched your contributions. And instead, I treated you like you were disposable. I'm sorry, Emma. Truly. I studied him, trying to figure out if this was genuine or just another manipulation. But he looked too tired for manipulation, too defeated to be playing games. I accept your apology, I said finally. But Victor, you need to understand something. What happened to you, what happened to Kane Industries, that wasn't just about me. That was years of toxic leadership, of valuing ego over talent, of creating a culture where people were afraid to challenge you. I leaned forward. I was just the catalyst. The problems were already there. He nodded slowly. You're right. I know you're right. I've had a lot of time to think about my failures, about the kind of leader I was. He stood, preparing to leave. I won't take up any more of your time. I needed you to know that I understand what I did, and that I'm sorry. He walked to the door, then paused and turned back. For what it's worth, he said, you're going to do amazing things here. You already are. James Morrison is lucky to have you, and I'm glad you landed somewhere that deserves your talent. After he left, I sat at my desk for a long time, processing. I'd gotten everything I wanted, the revenge, the vindication, the apology, the success. So why did I still feel unsettled? Maybe because revenge, it turned out, wasn't as satisfying as I'd imagined. It didn't erase the hurt or undo the humiliation or give back the years I'd wasted at a company that didn't value me. It just ended things, created closure, allowed me to move forward. Which was valuable, definitely. But not the triumphant victory I'd envisioned. I pulled up my current project, an application of quantum encryption for medical records that could revolutionize patient privacy, and lost myself in work. This was what mattered now. Not revenge or vindication or proving anyone wrong. Just creating things that mattered, leading a team that respected me, building something meaningful. 6 months after that conversation with Victor, I was at a tech industry awards ceremony. Titan Quantum had just launched our first commercial product, a quantum encrypted communications system that every major bank and government agency wanted, and James had insisted I attend the ceremony to accept the award for Innovation of the Year. I stood on stage in a room full of industry leaders and tech executives, holding a glass trophy that was probably expensive but felt meaningless compared to the actual work, and gave a short speech about the importance of supporting innovative engineers and creating environments where talent can thrive. As I walked off stage, I caught sight of someone in the audience. Marcus from engineering, my former coworker from Kane Industries. We made eye contact and he smiled, giving me a small nod of congratulations. After the ceremony, he found me at the reception. Emma, he said, shaking my hand. Congratulations. Really. You deserve this. Thanks, Marcus. How are things at? I trailed off, not sure what to call Kane Industries now that it had been absorbed into a larger corporation. Complicated, he admitted. Different management, different culture, lots of uncertainty. A lot of us are looking at opportunities elsewhere. He hesitated, then, actually, I was hoping to talk to you about that. Titan Quantum is hiring, right? I smiled. Send me your resume. We're always looking for good people. Over the next few months, I hired 6 more engineers from Kane Industries, talented people who'd been stuck under Victor's toxic leadership and were thriving now that they had freedom and support and recognition. It felt like a kind of redemption, taking something that had been broken and making it better, giving people opportunities they deserved. 1 year after the patent sale, I did an interview with Rachel Kim for a follow-up article about where everyone had ended up. So looking back, Rachel asked, do you regret how everything went down? The revenge, the public nature of it, the way Kane Industries collapsed? I thought carefully about my answer. I regret that 4,000 people lost their jobs or had their careers disrupted, I said honestly. I regret that a company I once cared about doesn't exist anymore. But do I regret standing up for myself? Regret knowing my worth and refusing to accept mistreatment? No. Never. I paused, finding the right words. What happened wasn't revenge, not really. It was consequences. Victor Kane made choices about how to treat people, how to lead, how to do business. I made choices too. And the market, the industry, everyone involved reacted to those choices. That's not revenge. That's just reality. And what about now? Rachel asked. Are you happy? Was I happy? I looked around my office at Titan Quantum, at the team I'd built, at the projects we were working on, at the future we were creating. I thought about the freedom I had now, the respect, the resources to do work that actually mattered. I thought about the 23 patents I'd filed in the last year, all under my own name, all with protections ensuring I'd never be exploited again. I thought about the $1.5 billion that had changed my life but hadn't defined it, that sat mostly in investments and charitable foundations because I'd learned that money was just a tool, not a goal. Yeah, I said, and meant it completely. I'm happy. The article published and went viral again, spawning dozens of think pieces about workplace revenge, professional boundaries, toxic leadership, and what employees owe, or don't owe, to their employers. Some people praised me as a hero. Others criticized me as vindictive. Most people just found the story fascinating, a morality tale about power and consequences and what happens when someone pushes back. I stopped reading the comments after a while, stopped caring what strangers thought about decisions they'd never have to make. I had work to do, a team to lead, a future to build. 2 years after the firing that changed everything, I was invited to speak at a major tech conference about innovation and leadership. I almost declined. Public speaking had never been my favorite, but James convinced me it was important, that I had a perspective people needed to hear. So I stood on a stage in front of 5,000 people and told my story. Not the revenge story, not the drama and conflict and corporate warfare. But the story of learning to value yourself, of recognizing when you're in a situation that's not serving you, of having the courage to walk away, or in my case, to take something with you that you'd built on your own. The most important thing I learned, I said, my voice carrying through the auditorium, is that loyalty to a company means nothing if that company isn't loyal to you. And I'm not talking about some idealistic, emotional loyalty. I'm talking about basic respect. Fair compensation. Recognition for your contributions. A work environment that doesn't destroy your mental health or your sense of self-worth. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces, engineers, executives, founders, employees at every level. For 7 years, I gave everything to Kane Industries. I worked late nights and weekends. I missed birthdays and holidays. I sacrificed relationships and personal time. And I told myself it was worth it because I believed in the work, believed in the company, believed that eventually my dedication would be recognized and rewarded. The room was completely silent. But here's what I learned: dedication without reciprocation is just exploitation. And the moment I realized that, the moment I was fired in front of everyone who mattered, was actually the most liberating moment of my career. Because I finally understood that I didn't owe them anything anymore. I clicked to the next slide, which showed the patent filing for my quantum encryption technology. I developed this on my own time because some instinct told me I needed something that was mine alone. Something no one could take credit for, something no one could use to define my worth except me. And when the time came, when I had nothing left to lose, that technology became my leverage. Another click, showing Titan Quantum's current projects. Now I lead a team of brilliant engineers doing work that matters. We have the resources we need, the recognition we deserve, and the freedom to innovate without fear. And you know what the difference is? It's not that we're somehow more talented now than we were before. It's that we're valued. We're respected. We're trusted to do our jobs without someone constantly taking credit or undermining our contributions. I looked directly at the audience. So if you're in a situation where you're not valued, where your work goes unrecognized, where you're treated as disposable, document everything. Protect yourself. Build something that's yours. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's success. It's proving that you were always the valuable one, and they were just too blind to see it. The applause started before I finished, building into a standing ovation that felt surreal and overwhelming. After the speech, I was surrounded by people wanting to talk, wanting advice, wanting to share their own stories of toxic workplaces and professional betrayals. I stayed for hours, listening and offering what guidance I could, realizing that my story had resonated with so many people because it wasn't unique, it was universal. How many talented people were stuck in jobs that undervalued them? How many engineers and developers and creators were having their work stolen, their contributions dismissed, their potential wasted? And how many of them felt powerless to change anything because they needed the paycheck, needed the health insurance, needed the stability even if it came at the cost of their dignity? Later that evening, back in my hotel room, I received an email that made me smile. It was from Jennifer from marketing, one of the people who'd sat silently in that boardroom 2 years ago while Victor Kane destroyed me in front of everyone. The email was short: Emma, I saw your speech today. I wanted to reach out and apologize for not speaking up when Victor fired you. I was a coward. I told myself it wasn't my place, that getting involved would jeopardize my own position, but the truth is I should have said something. You deserved better, and I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to stand up for you. I left Kane Industries last month. Or what's left of it, anyway. Your speech today made me realize I've been making excuses for staying in a toxic situation for too long. I'm attaching my resume, not because I expect you to hire me, but because I wanted you to know that I'm finally taking control of my own career the way you did. Thank you for being brave enough to show the rest of us how it's done. I read the email 3 times, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Anger that she hadn't spoken up when it mattered. Understanding because I knew how corporate fear worked, how easily people convinced themselves that staying silent was the safe choice. And finally, respect for the fact that she was acknowledging her mistake and trying to do better. I forwarded her resume to our HR director with a note: Jennifer Martinez. Strong marketing background. Please fast-track her for an interview. Everyone deserved a second chance. Everyone deserved the opportunity to work somewhere that brought out their best instead of their worst. 3 years after the firing, Kane Industries, or rather, the company that had absorbed it, announced they were shutting down the original Kane Industries brand entirely. The name would be retired, the legacy products discontinued, everything folded into the parent company's operations. It was the final death of something that had once been innovative and exciting, before ego and toxicity had rotted it from the inside. I felt a pang of sadness, despite everything. That company had been a part of my life for 7 years. I'd made friends there, learned skills there, developed the foundation of my career there. But I also recognized that sometimes things need to die so something better can grow in their place. Kane Industries was gone. But the engineers who'd worked there, the talented, creative, dedicated people who'd been held back by bad leadership, they were thriving now. Scattered across the industry, working at companies that valued them, finally getting the recognition they deserved. And Titan Quantum was stronger than ever. We'd expanded to 300 employees, launched 8 major products, filed over 200 patents. We'd become the industry leader in quantum encryption and data security, exactly as James Morrison had envisioned when he made that initial investment. More importantly, we'd built a culture that I was genuinely proud of. No one took credit for others' work. No one was afraid to speak up in meetings. No one felt like their job was constantly on the line just because they disagreed with leadership. We made mistakes, definitely, every company does. But we fixed them instead of hiding them. We learned instead of blaming. We grew instead of stagnating. On the 3-year anniversary of the firing, a date I'd marked in my calendar without quite knowing why, I took myself out to dinner at the nicest restaurant in the city. Expensive wine, multiple courses, the kind of meal that would have felt absurdly indulgent 3 years ago but now just felt appropriate. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the woman I'd been then, scared and hurt and humiliated, but also strong enough to turn disaster into opportunity. And to the woman I was now, successful and respected and genuinely happy in a way I'd never been at Kane Industries. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah: "Happy anniversary of the best thing that ever happened to you." I laughed, because she was right. Getting fired had been the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because of the money, though that certainly didn't hurt. Not because of the revenge, though watching Victor Kane face consequences for his actions had been satisfying. But because it had forced me to see myself clearly, to recognize my own worth, to stop waiting for someone else to give me permission to be successful. I'd spent 7 years believing that if I just worked hard enough, if I just proved myself enough, Kane Industries would eventually reward me appropriately. But that was never going to happen, because the problem wasn't my effort or my talent. The problem was a leadership structure that didn't value those things, that saw employees as interchangeable and expendable. Getting fired had broken that illusion. Had shown me that the loyalty I'd felt was one-sided, that the dedication I'd given was unreciprocated. And that realization, painful as it was, had freed me to build something better. For years after the firing, I received an invitation to speak at MIT's graduation ceremony. Me, giving a commencement address to engineering students about to enter the workforce. It felt surreal, like something that happened to other people, to famous people, not to someone who'd spent most of her career as an anonymous engineer working in cubicles. But I accepted, because I had things I wanted to say to those students, lessons I wished someone had taught me before I entered the corporate world. Standing at that podium in front of thousands of graduates and their families, I felt nervous in a way I hadn't felt in years. These were bright, talented kids about to face all the same challenges I'd faced, all the same potential for exploitation and disappointment. You've spent 4 years learning technical skills, I began. Learning to code, to design, to solve complex problems. And those skills are valuable, essential even. But today I want to talk about something your professors probably didn't cover: how to protect yourself in the workplace. I saw some confused faces, some intrigued ones. Because here's what nobody tells you: being good at your job isn't enough. Being talented isn't enough. Working hard isn't enough. If you don't understand your own value, if you don't document your contributions, if you don't set boundaries, you will be exploited. I shared my story then, not all the details, but enough. The years of unrecognized work, the stolen credit, the final humiliation. And then the response, the patent sale, the rebuilding. I'm not telling you this to make you cynical, I said. I'm telling you this to make you smart. Document your work. Keep records of your contributions. Understand what you're worth in the market. And most importantly, know when to walk away. I paused, making sure they understood how serious I was. Some of you will be lucky. You'll find companies that value you, leaders who support you, environments where you can thrive. Treasure those positions, because they're rarer than you think. But some of you will end up in toxic situations. You'll have bosses who take credit for your work, colleagues who undermine you, companies that see you as disposable. And when that happens, I want you to remember something: you don't owe them your soul. You owe them professional work in exchange for professional compensation. Nothing more. The moment they breach that contract, and taking credit for your work is a breach, denying you deserved promotions is a breach, creating a hostile environment is a breach, you are free to respond accordingly. Protect yourself. Build your own portfolio. Develop your own patents if you can. Create leverage that's yours alone. Because the best insurance policy in this industry isn't loyalty to a company. It's ownership of your own value. The applause was enthusiastic, and afterward, dozens of students wanted to talk, wanted advice, wanted reassurance that it was possible to have both professional success and personal integrity. I stayed until the last student had asked their question, remembering what it felt like to be that young and uncertain, hoping to make a difference for at least some of them. 5 years after the firing, I stepped back from day-to-day operations at Titan Quantum. Not retiring, exactly, but transitioning to a more advisory role while I focused on research and development. I'd built something successful, something sustainable, and now it was time to let the next generation of leaders take it forward while I returned to what I loved most: creating. I set up a private research lab with the best equipment money could buy and started working on projects that interested me without worrying about commercial viability or market timing. Pure research, the kind I'd always dreamed of doing. And I started a foundation to support engineers from underrepresented backgrounds, scholarships, mentorship programs, grants for independent research. Because I remembered what it felt like to be undervalued, and I wanted to make sure talented people had opportunities regardless of their background or connections. The Foundation's first annual report showed we'd supported 300 engineers in the first year alone, and the stories they shared, of dreams made possible, of barriers broken down, of careers launched, reminded me why all of this mattered. 6 years after the firing, I ran into Marcus at a conference. We hadn't kept in close touch, he'd moved to a different company after leaving Kane Industries, but seeing him brought back memories of those early days at Titan Quantum when we were building something new. Emma. He greeted me with genuine warmth. How are you? I heard you stepped back from Titan Quantum. Just from operations, I clarified. I'm still involved in research. How about you? Good, actually. Really good. I'm CTO at a startup now, medical devices, very exciting work. And I wanted to thank you. Thank me? For what? For showing me it was possible to leave, he said. I'd been at Kane Industries for 10 years, and I was miserable, but I convinced myself I couldn't afford to quit, that I needed the stability. Watching you walk away and build something better, it gave me courage to do the same. He smiled. So thank you. For being brave first. That conversation stayed with me for days afterward, making me realize that maybe the most important impact of everything that had happened wasn't the technology or the money or even the justice of Victor Kane facing consequences. Maybe it was simply showing other people that it was possible to stand up for yourself, to refuse to accept mistreatment, to build something better. 7 years after the firing, the same length of time I'd spent at Kane Industries, I was contacted by a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell my story. It's not just about you, she explained over video call. It's about the broader issues of workplace culture in tech, of how talent gets exploited, of what happens when people finally push back. Your story is the through line, but we'd interview dozens of other engineers, executives, industry experts. I was hesitant. Did I really want to relive all of that in such a public way? Did I want to be known forever as the revenge engineer or whatever label would inevitably get attached? But then I thought about all the messages I'd received over the years from people who'd read my story and found courage to leave bad situations, to negotiate for better pay, to stand up for themselves. If a documentary could reach even more people, could spark even more conversations about workplace culture and employee treatment. Okay, I said. Let's do it. The filming took 6 months. Interviews with me, with former Kane Industries employees, with James Morrison and the Titan Quantum team, with industry analysts and workplace culture experts. They even got Victor Kane to agree to an interview, though I didn't watch his footage until the premiere. The documentary, titled Patent Pending: How One Engineer's Revenge Changed Silicon Valley, premiered at Sundance and got picked up by a major streaming platform. I watched it at the premiere with Sarah beside me, both of us nervous about how the story would be told. But the filmmaker had done something I hadn't expected. She'd made it bigger than just my story. She'd woven together dozens of narratives about workplace exploitation, toxic leadership, and the systems that enabled it. My story was the centerpiece, but it was contextualized within a broader examination of how the tech industry treated talent. And Victor Kane's interview, I'd been dreading this part, was surprisingly honest. He talked about his failures as a leader, about how ego had blinded him to talent, about how he'd created a culture of fear and competition instead of collaboration. Emma Chin was the best engineer I ever worked with, he said on screen, looking older and wearier than I remembered. And I destroyed her career because I felt threatened by her competence. That's not leadership. That's insecurity masquerading as power. The documentary ended with me in my research lab, working on some complex equation, voiceover talking about resilience and reinvention and the importance of knowing your worth. The final shot was me looking directly at the camera and saying, "The best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so successful that your former employer's downfall is just a footnote in your story." The audience applauded, and I felt tears in my eyes, though I wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe because seeing it all laid out like that, the whole arc of disaster and recovery and triumph, made me realize just how far I'd come. Or maybe just because it was finally, truly over. The story had been told, the lessons had been shared, and now I could move forward without constantly looking back. The documentary sparked exactly the kind of conversations I'd hoped for. Think pieces about workplace culture, discussions about employee rights and corporate responsibility, debates about what constitutes fair treatment. Several major tech companies announced new policies about credit attribution and promotion transparency, directly citing the documentary as inspiration. A few CEOs were even pushed out after employees came forward with stories of exploitation similar to mine. It felt like something was shifting, like maybe the industry was finally starting to take workplace culture seriously. 8 years after the firing, I was invited back to MIT, not to give another commencement speech, but to teach a semester as a visiting professor. Ethics and Leadership in Technology, the course was called, and I designed it to cover all the things I wished I'd learned before entering the workforce. How to document your contributions. How to negotiate effectively. How to recognize toxic environments. How to protect your intellectual property. When to stay and fight, and when to walk away. The students were engaged and eager, asking questions that showed they understood these weren't abstract concepts but practical skills they'd need to survive and thrive. And teaching them, sharing everything I'd learned through such painful experience, felt like closing a circle. Turning my worst professional experience into something useful, something that might protect others from similar situations. 9 years after the firing, Titan Quantum went public. The IPO was massively successful. We raised $2 billion and our stock price immediately jumped 30% on the first day of trading. My equity stake, carefully negotiated all those years ago, was suddenly worth another $3 billion on paper. Not that the money mattered anymore, I already had more than I could spend in several lifetimes, but it was validation. Proof that the technology I'd created, the team I'd built, the company I'd helped grow was genuinely valuable. At the closing bell celebration, James Morrison pulled me aside. "None of this happens without you," he said seriously. "The technology, the team, the culture we built, it all starts with that patent you brought me 9 years ago. So thank you, Emma, for trusting us with your work." I smiled, thinking about how strange life was. 9 years ago I'd been sitting in my car in a parking garage, devastated and humiliated, making a desperate phone call to a competitor because I had nothing left to lose. And now I was standing in the New York Stock Exchange watching the company we'd built together become one of the most valuable tech IPOs of the decade. 10 years after the firing, I received an unexpected letter. Handwritten, on nice paper, postmarked from Colorado. I opened it curiously and recognized the handwriting immediately. Victor Kane. "Dear Emma," it began. "I know we haven't spoken in many years, and I'm not writing to ask for anything or to intrude on your life. I'm writing because I'm teaching now, business ethics at a small college in Boulder, and I start every semester with your story. Not as a cautionary tale about revenge, but as a lesson about leadership failure and its consequences. I tell my students about a brilliant engineer I once had the privilege of working with, and how my arrogance and insecurity led me to destroy what should have been a powerful mentorship. I tell them about the cost of that decision, not just to me personally, but to everyone who depended on my leadership. I show them the documentary. I make them read articles analyzing what went wrong. And then I ask them, what would you do differently? I thought you should know that your story is teaching the next generation of business leaders to be better than I was. That probably doesn't mean much to you, but it means something to me. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. You deserved both of those things 10 years ago, and I'm glad you found them despite my best efforts to the contrary. With respect and regret, Victor Kane, I read the letter 3 times, trying to figure out how I felt about it. There was no request for forgiveness, no attempt to minimize what he'd done, no expectation of response. Just acknowledgement. And information that he was using his failure to teach others. I thought about writing back, but ultimately decided against it. Some chapters needed to stay closed. But I folded the letter carefully and filed it away, a strange memento of the day that changed everything. Now, sitting here 10 years later in my research lab overlooking the bay, with achievements beyond anything I imagined and a life I genuinely love, I can finally see the whole story clearly. Victor Kane didn't destroy my career that day in the boardroom. He freed it. He forced me to recognize my own value instead of waiting for someone else to see it. He pushed me out of a situation I never should have stayed in, into a future I never would have pursued if I'd remained comfortable. Was it revenge when I sold that patent to Titan Technologies? Maybe. Was it justice? Definitely. But more than either of those things, it was simply a woman understanding her worth and refusing to settle for less than she deserved. The patent sale wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. Everything that came after, the success, the leadership, the impact, the fulfillment, that was the real victory. Not the money, though that certainly didn't hurt. Not watching Victor Kane face consequences, though that brought a certain satisfaction. But building a life on my own terms, creating work that mattered, leading with the values I believed in, and helping others do the same. That's the revenge that lasts. That's the victory that means something. And that's the story I hope resonates with everyone who's ever felt undervalued, overlooked, or dismissed. You are not disposable. Your talent matters. Your contributions have value. And if the people around you can't see that, can't appreciate that, can't compensate you accordingly, then maybe it's time to find people who will. Or better yet, build something so remarkable that the whole world has to acknowledge your worth. That's what I did. And it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. Because 10 years ago, Victor Kane looked at me and saw someone disposable, someone he could discard without consequence. He was wrong. And the $1.5 billion patent sale was just the beginning of proving exactly how wrong he was. The real revenge wasn't in his downfall. It was in my rise. And that revenge will last the rest of my life.